What did we learn from the recently completed New York Giants rookie minicamp? I dive into all that coming up next on the Locked On Giants podcast.
You are Locked On Giants, your daily New York Giants podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Today's episode of the Locked On Giants podcast is brought to you by FanDuel. Make every moment more. Right now, new customers get $150 in bonus bets with any winning $5 bet. Visit FanDuel.com/lockedon today to get started. Hello, New York Giant fans, and welcome to another edition of the Locked On Giants podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast family, your team every day. I'm your host, Patricia Trainer, credential member of the New York Giants media for Locked On, as well as for the New York Giants team page over on the Fan Nation Network, part of SI. You can find our written work at si.com/NFL/Giants. And a special welcome on in to my Blue Crew community members, my everydayers, my newcomers, and everybody in between. Thank you so much for spending part of your day with us here on the Locked On Giants podcast. And on today's podcast episode, what did we learn from the New York Giants 2-day rookie mini camp? Now, the mini camp, not a lot in terms of, team drills. There wasn't much. Matter of fact, it wasn't any 11 on 11. It was more instructions and whatnot, but we learned some stuff just by some observations. We listened to the media availabilities, asked questions, and we're able to come away with a few things. So we're going to talk about what we learned, some roster notes, if you will, and not just from the rookies, but also, the entire roster. It's going to cover the entire roster. Then we're going to have an injury update. I know a lot of you have asked me about various players who are injured, where do they stand and what's the prognosis for them, not just, for the rest of the spring, but moving forward into training camp. So we'll talk about that. And then there were a couple of acquisitions, veteran acquisitions, Nathan Rourke and Allen Robinson, quarterback and wide receiver. And a lot of you are like, what does this mean for the incumbents? Is this a case of out with the old, in with the new? So we'll talk about all that on today's podcast. And again, thank you for tuning in. Let's get right into it. All right, we're going to start off with what we learned, roster notes. And, I think it goes without saying that Malik Neighbors, first-round draft pick, he's going to be a starter this year. He is going to be the number one receiver. I'm not telling you anything you don't already know. But guys that you want to keep an eye on are mainly you have your day 3 picks, a couple of day 3 picks that you definitely want to keep an eye on. And that includes running back Tyrone Tracy Jr., who was the 5th-round draft pick, and tight end Theo Johnson, the 4th-round pick. Now, with Darren Waller likely to retire, and again, no decision has been made, but that's the direction it is trending in. Theo Johnson's going to get a big opportunity to contribute as part of the 12 personnel package, which is 1 running back, 2 tight ends. And speaking of big, can I just tell you, Theo Johnson, he is a big man, very tall, very well built, powerfully built. I hope that translates into being a brick wall for blocking. I don't know how he did in at Penn State in that area, but he's definitely got the size and the strength and the physical nature to do all that. So we'll have to see. But you're going to see him probably team up with Daniel Bellinger to be the 2 tight end personnel set. And I would expect to see a lot of 12 personnel from the Giants, especially in the run game, especially with that running back by committee approach that they are going to take. And that committee, of course, is going to consist of Devin Singletary, who is going to be the lead back. And then as far as the number 2 back, some people think it's going to be Eric Gray. I'm not convinced it's going to be Eric Gray yet. There will be a competition there, obviously, but I would say keep an eye on Tracy for that second back. Tracy looked really, really good in this rookie mini camp, was smooth. The vision was there. He was spotting creases and hitting them quickly. And he is also very difficult to bring down. So, you want a guy in this running back committee, you want a guy who can handle it between the tackles, who is difficult to bring down, who can wear down defenses, that can be Tyrone Tracy. So that's something to keep an eye on, certainly as we get into the OTAs and then into summer training camp. But that's how I kind of see things gravitating. You know, Eric Gray, I think he's a nice little change of pace back, but, you know, if anything, he might be the third back. And then Dante Miller. I know a lot of you asked me about Dante Miller. I'm wondering if maybe he goes to the practice squad, if maybe they try and sneak him through there. Depends on how many backs they keep, but I just get a feeling that they're going to go with 3 backs in this case. But, you know, maybe they go with 4. I don't know, but I think it's going to be 3. And if it's 3, it's going to be Singletary. It's going to be Tracy. I think it's going to be Eric Gray. I think Gary Brightwell is in trouble for a roster spot. Gary Brightwell, more or less a special teams guy, good special teams guy, but replaceable. Just Sean Corbin, again, I don't think he makes it. So Dante Miller, I think, has the best chance of being the 4th guy, but I think maybe he goes to the practice squad. All depends, of course, on how injuries shake out. So, you know, that we kind of need to see how they go through training camp and how that all plays out. So that's how I see that playing out. Now, interestingly enough, head coach Brian Dable kind of gave a little clue as to what to expect at cornerback. Now, a lot of people, when Andrew Phillips was drafted in the 3rd round, a lot of people said, oh my God, they're taking a slot cornerback. You know, what are they going to do? Are they going to convert this guy to play cornerback 2? Or, you know, is this just another carbon copy of Cordell Flott? Well, Andrew Phillips, as we learned, he will be in the slot. That is where he worked during the minicamp. Now, the cornerback 2 position, you'll remember that the Giants tried to get veterans for that role. They tried to land the guy who was with Baltimore, White, I think it was, Tre'Davious White. There was another guy that they tried to get. I can't remember his name, but he went to Los Angeles Rams, and they weren't able to get these veteran cornerbacks. So when they weren't able to get these veteran cornerbacks and they ended up going via the draft, but they took a slot cornerback, here's what that kind of told me. So last year, Cordell Flott played most of his snaps in the slot. He is now going to move to the outside. He's going to be probably the incumbent at cornerback 2 opposite of Deonte Banks. And you have Andrew Phillips, who's going to step in and play part of that, you know, play the slot cornerback. Now, it may still be a committee approach for the slot cornerback. They did re-sign Darnay Holmes, but I think that was more or less for special teams than anything else. So, you know, when Joe Shane said, hey, you know, Andrew Phillips is going to play the slot, that's actually the position that Phillips feels most comfortable at. So that doesn't surprise me that it's how it's kind of gravitating. And what kind of does surprise me is, you know, after the Giants were unable to get a veteran cornerback after a couple of tries, that they've said, okay, you know what? We'll just throw Cordell Flott out there. You know, we've got confidence in him. Well, if you've had confidence in him all along, then why did you try to add a veteran who presumably, you know, the quality of veterans that they tried to add were guys that you knew were going to come right in and start. So, you know, I love the little word games that these coaches play, you know, when they say they have confidence in this guy, but meanwhile, you know, they go and they try and replace that guy, you know. But yeah, so Cordell Flott right now is the incumbent. And that's, you know, I'm kind of glad that's the way it's going to be because, you know, Nick McLeod would have been the other option there. And Nick McLeod is just so good on special teams. I didn't want to see him moved off of special teams and into the defense, even though, you know, he could handle it. You know, sometimes you don't want to upset, you know, a good thing. And I think last year the Giants had a really good thing with Darnay Holmes and Nick McLeod as their 2 punt gunners. So, you know, getting back to Phillips, look, that's actually not a bad addition or a bad idea to put him in the slot. The guy is really good at run defense, which was a problem for the Giants. As you guys know, last year, they need to get more physical in run defense, you know, especially if they're lined up in that nickel package. And that was just something they didn't have. So Phillips, not a very big guy. He's not tiny, but he's not, super big, but he packs a punch. And I kind of like that whole concept of him in the slot and Cordell Flott. You know, I'm willing to give that a shot and see, obviously the coaches see something in Cordell Flott, but my biggest concern with Cordell Flott moving to the outside is while he's a very physical player, he also is still on the thin side. And I hope that he holds up to the physical demands of the position. That was a problem last year. I think he missed a couple of games because he was injured. So that's definitely something that the Giants will have to, pay attention to. Now, I haven't seen Cordell Flott in person yet, so it's possible that he added some more bulk. So that's something I'll be keeping an eye on once we get to the OTAs towards the end of the month. All right, coming up next, we got some injury updates to talk about. People that you've asked about, we finally got some answers, so don't go anywhere. I'll have that for you right after this. Hey, Giant fans, passion, drive, and patience. What brings home the winning trophy is also what keeps your ride or die alive. eBay Motors has everything you need to maintain your vehicle and level it up to peak performance. From superchargers, roof racks, exhaust kits, LED headlights, and more, whether you're into speed, power, or style, eBay Motors has got you covered. With over 122 million parts for your number one ride or die, you'll always find exactly what you're looking for. And with eBay's Guaranteed Fit, your part is guaranteed to fit your ride every time or your money back. Because with eBay Motors, you're burning rubber, not cash. And with all the parts you need at the prices you want, it's easy to turn your car into the MVP and bring home that win. Keep your ride or die alive at ebaymotors.com. Eligible items only. Exclusions apply. eBay's Guaranteed Fit only available to U.S. customers. All right, everybody, welcome back to the Locked On Giants podcast. I'm your host, Patricia Traina, and what have we learned from Giants rookie minicamp? Rookie minicamp, not really, a full-fledged type of practice. It's more of an orientation session, a lot of coaching, a lot of, teaching going on. But we also were able to pick up little hints, if you will, from the media sessions, from what we saw on the field, as to what to expect as the team goes into OTAs and then eventually training camp. So that is the topic of today's show. And again, thank you for spending time with us today. Let's talk about some injury updates. I know a lot of you guys wanted to know about the status of injured players. So head coach Brian Daboll was asked about some of these guys. And I also did a little sniffing around to find out the status of various guys. And here's the update for you. Aaron Robinson, cornerback. Now, this is a guy that I know some of you asked me, whatever happened to this guy? Aaron Robinson spent all of last year on the PUP list. There was a time when he was designated to return and didn't make it back. And Aaron Robinson, remember, a couple of years ago, tore both his ACL and his MCL. So he needed complete reconstructive surgery. They didn't feel he was going to be ready last year. Even after he started moving around, he wasn't moving around to their satisfaction. So they left him on PUP. This year, he's still working with the rehab group, according to Daboll, which means that injury was really a whopper, for him to be still really rehabbing at this stage of the game now that he's more than a year removed from it. So Daboll said he has been working with the rehab group during the phase 2 of the offseason program. I'm not sure how Robinson is going to fit in if he is cleared at this point. I mean, ideally, you would want him to fit in as an outside cornerback, but I just don't know if that ship has sailed. I mean, the guy has basically been injured the first 3 years of his career. And at some point you say, okay, you know what? We got to move on. So I think he'll get a chance to compete if he is cleared medically. I don't know necessarily if he's going to make it. I hope he does. He's a good kid, but I'm not so sure if he does, to be honest with you. Okay, Evan Neal, right tackle. Evan Neal is recovering from an off-season ankle surgery. He has been moving around, but he's still in the rehab group, obviously. Remember, a lot of these guys who had surgery, they're going to be in the rehab groups They're going to be limited because it's only May. You know, these guys don't really have to be ready until we get to summer camp, late in summer camp, and certainly by the time we get to the regular season. So with Evan Neal, the impression I got is that, yes, he's going to do work at right tackle, but you're also going to probably see Jermaine Illuminor get some snaps at right tackle as well. Not necessarily to get Illuminor ready for the position because, you know, he has played it before, but he's going to get some snaps there. I would be stunned if he doesn't get snaps there this summer because I wonder just if Neal is going to be fully cleared to partake in everything come training camp. I have my doubts about that, but it's early. It's only May. Like I said, we've got a couple more months before we get to that point. So maybe Neal will be fully cleared. I mean, I don't think he'll start on PUP, but I think they'll take it slow with him because remember, you know, when you've had surgery and you're rehabbing, so you're not really training full blast the way you need to if you're, you know, still rehabbing. So I think that's where they're kind of at with Evan Neal. All right, Graham Gano, another guy a lot of people asked about. Gano is progressing, but the Giants signed international kicker candidate Jude McAtamey, who kicked the last 2 years at Rutgers. He's going to do a lot of the kicking, I think, in the summertime. Gano's going to do some, but I don't think they're going to have him do a lot as he continues, you know, that the latter part of his rehab from that knee surgery that he had that ended his season prematurely. So Gano on track. The Giants did get an exemption, a roster exemption on McAtamey, who, you know, again, he was Irish-born kicker, kicked for Rutgers the last 2 years. So he's part of that international wave of players. Teams get exemptions on those guys. So he could be like a practice squad type player who doesn't count against the practice squad and is just kind of there, you know, for in the event of an emergency. Although what's interesting about him is that he was a kickoff specialist in his final year at Rutgers, whereas the year prior to that, he did scoring. So I wonder if maybe the Giants are thinking about having Gano strictly be like the scorer, and then maybe for a kickoff specialist, if they can fit him on the roster, having McAtamey do that. It's a possibility. I mean, it would be a luxury to carry two kickers, in my opinion, and it would depend on, you know, do they have the roster spot, the room on the roster to do that, which they may or may not have, depending on the injury situation. But you wonder if that's maybe something the Giants are considering. All right, and then lastly, Daniel Jones. Now, you have probably seen pictures of Daniel Jones on the Giants website, you know, participating in phase 2 of the program. Head coach Brian Dable was asked about Jones, especially after the team picked up Nathan Rourke off waivers, who we are going to talk about in the next segment. And Dable basically said that Jones has been able to do some stuff in phase 2, but as for phase 3, we'll see. So he kind of left the door open a little bit as to whether or not Jones will actually participate in phase 3. And if he does, how much will he actually do? And what I still say is going to happen, this, you know, based on some of the things I've been able to kind of find out by poking around, the season that doesn't start until September. So there is a good possibility, even though Daniel is on schedule, even though he is pushing to be ready by training camp. You know, when you say a guy is ready for training camp, does that simply mean that he's ready, that he's able to pass his physical and can participate in training camp? Or does that mean he's able to go full blast? I think in the case of Daniel, what's going to happen is he's going to be limited in the beginning part of training camp. He's going to do, you know, some individual drills, maybe the 7-on-7 stuff, but the team drills, I question how much he's going to be able to do. I know he's going to want to do that stuff, but if I'm the Giants, don't push him. Don't push the guy. I mean, have him ready for week 1. That's more important. I'm pretty sure Daniel is not going to play in any of the preseason games. And don't forget, they also got to get Drew Lock up to speed here. So Drew Lock will probably get quite a bit of snaps. And, I jumped ahead. I talked about training camp. So what about the prognosis for the OTAs? Again, I think Daniel is probably going to be limited to individuals, not necessarily to the full team stuff, but, he is making progress. And like it or not, folks, he's going to be the starter once he is declared to be fully healthy. And they're going to just see how far they can go with him. And, there's optimism, but, we'll see how far they can go with him once he gets fully green lighted. All right. Coming up next, I mentioned Nathan Rourke. Allen Robinson's another guy they've added. Okay, so what did those guys mean? Is this a case of out with the old, in with the new? We'll talk about that right after this. Hey, Giant fans, it's winner take all time in the NBA and NHL, and FanDuel is giving you a shot to bring home a big win of your own. If you're like me and you're liking the New York Knicks odds or the New York Rangers odds as they pursue championship immortality in their respective sports, you'll want to be part of the action. And right now, when you sign up for an account on FanDuel, you will get $150 in bonus bets with any winning $5 bet. It's $150 to bet on spreads, money lines, player props, and more. Visit FanDuel.com/lockedon and make every playoff shot count. FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. All right, everybody, welcome back to the Locked On Giants podcast. I'm your host, Patricia Traina, and we got another busy week here on the Locked On Giants podcast. We've got the schedule release coming out later in the week on Wednesday. So I will have a show devoted to that. We'll just break down the schedule every which way but loose. So that's coming up. I'm hoping to connect with Penn State tight end coach Ty Howell this week. We had to reschedule last week, unfortunately, but I'm hoping to have him on so we can hear a little bit more about Theo Johnson, who very impressive stature. And by the way, looked pretty good at the rookie minicamp, I thought, at any rate. So we'll definitely talk about that. So those are some of the topics coming up here on the Locked On Giants podcast, and I hope you will tune in to all of that. All right. Now, in this segment, the Giants made 2 veteran acquisitions. They signed Allen Robinson II, who is a wide receiver, a guy who, incidentally, a few years ago when he was a free agent, I was hoping the Giants would land him, and he ended up going from Jacksonville, I think, to Chicago. So now he is with the Giants. So we'll talk about that and what that maybe means for the receiver core. And then Nathan Rourke, whom the Giants put in a waiver claim and acquired from the New England Patriots, a guy who the Atlanta Falcons also tried to get. I mean, I don't know what the Falcons are trying to do at quarterback, to be honest with you. I mean, but that's for Aaron Freeman, our Locked On Falcons host, to try and figure that out. But needless to say, the Falcons have done, made some head scratching decisions, I think, when it's come to the quarterback position. But anyway, let's start with Rourke and what that means. So Rourke, look, Brian Daboll said that they were going to add another arm because, like I said before in the previous segment, the Giants don't know if Daniel Jones is going to be medically cleared or when he will be fully cleared to do everything, 11 on 11, all the team drills and all that good stuff. So they want 3 arms for training camp. That means they had to get another guy. They like this guy, Rourke, who was with the Patriots, weighed by the Patriots, and the Giants put in a claim and they got him. Now, Rourke, of course, a CFL star, did very well in the Canadian Football League. What is his prognosis for the Giants? Going to compete probably with Tommy DeVito, I would say. I don't think he's going to be a threat necessarily to Jones or to Drew Lock. I think Tommy DeVito is the guy who's got to look out for his roster spot. So we'll see how that plays off. And, a lot of people are like, well, will they keep 3 quarterbacks on the roster? The answer really depends on what happens with Jones. If Jones is fully good to go by the start of the season, then they will probably keep 2 and put the 3rd one on the practice squad. If Jones is still iffy, then they'll have to keep 3. They won't have any choice because, until Jones is fully ready to play, they will have to have 3 on the roster because chances are he might be like inactive for those first few games. So, All right. Now, what about Allen Robinson? A lot of people initially thought when they saw the signing, that's it for Darius Slayton. Well, not necessarily, at least not right away. So in Allen Robinson, basically what they're doing is two things. Number one, they're replacing the senior veteran presence that they lost with Sterling Shepard, who, right now is unsigned. And, we'll see if Sterling Shepard retires. I think he will, but he hasn't decided that. So Allen Robinson provides that veteran presence that Sterling Shepard provided. But more importantly, Allen Robinson is a slot receiver. He is a big slot receiver and a big physical slot receivers. So he is kind of the anti-Wan'Dale Robinson, who's a smaller, shiftier guy. He's physical, but not quite as physical as an Allen Robinson. So basically, this signing of Allen Robinson is not just camp fodder. It's not just another camp body. I can see him, potentially being an option in the slot along with Wan'Dale Robinson, giving the Giants an option. So if they go up against a bigger cornerback, for example, now they put Allen Robinson in that slot, and now they have a better matchup as opposed to putting, the smaller Wan'Dale Robinson in there and letting him try to, fight off a bigger cornerback. So that's why I think they added Allen Robinson. It's not necessarily to replace Darius Slayton, who, by the way, is not really a slot receiver, because a lot of people thought, oh, maybe they'll trade him. Now, I'm not saying that Slayton won't be considered for a trade at some point, especially if, Malik Neighbors comes on and Jalen Hyatt comes on, and who knows, maybe Isaiah Hodgins comes on or something like that. Maybe the Giants look to flip Slayton later on in the year. But right now, don't see it happening. I think Slayton will be on this roster, even though I get it. The contract is still a question mark for him. He'd like long-term security. He's not going to get it, though, at least not this year from the Giants, if at all. So that's kind of where that stands. So the Robinson signing, very under the radar, but very important in terms of what this coaching staff is looking to do on offense. All right, everybody, that's going to do it for this edition of the Locked On Giants podcast. Hope you enjoyed the program. And again, please keep it here all week long. I'll have new episodes for you on various topics. And until then, I will see y'all tomorrow.